Pokémon Journeys, Pokémon Horizons. How do they compare? Which is better? Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, it's Charles. How are you today? We are 5 episodes deep into the brand new Pokemon anime series, Pokemon Horizons, and the comparisons to the Ash Ketchum era of the anime are flying left and right. Some fans are fist pumping their way into the sunset aboard the Liko and Roy Express, and others don't want to leave Ash behind because, well, he is the OG Pokebro. But based upon what we've seen thus far, how exactly do Liko and Roy's adventures stack up against Ash era Pokemon? Of course, Ash era Pokemon includes over 1,200 regular anime episodes and 23 feature films spread across nearly 26 years, so instead, let's make a more targeted comparison that pits Pokemon Horizons against just its predecessor series, Pokemon Journeys. The plan today is to use the entirety of Pokemon Journeys and the first 5 episodes of Pokemon Horizons to draw some early comparisons between the premise, structure, characters, and direction of these two series. So let's get to it. Basically, the premise of Pokemon Journeys was that Ash and his new friend Go became research fellows at the Cerise Laboratory in Vermilion City and toured the world to investigate matters related to Pokemon while spending way too much money on food and flights. Additionally, Ash soon got wrapped up in the World Coronation Series, a competition in which trainers from around the world battled through a rigorous ranking system in hopes of claiming a spot in the season-end Masters 8 tournament, for a shot at defeating the very best of the world's very best and becoming the new world monarch, aka the #1 trainer in the world. While Ash battled his way to the top, Go spent his screen time catching Pokemon willy-nilly for the first half of the series, but eventually got involved in Project Mew, an organization putting together an A-team of adventurers to track down everyone's favorite pink bubble cat. But more than anything, Pokemon Journeys was a celebration of Ash's long time as the hero of the Pokemon anime. As such, a revolving door of familiar locations and classic character cameos delighted viewers for the most part, and Ash eventually achieved the ultimate victory. By comparison, Pokemon Horizons has none of that rich legacy or piles upon piles of potential fan service opportunities to draw from, unless, of course, they do end up rolling a bunch of classic characters into the mix, which, while it seems unlikely, they very well could do. But assuming that isn't the case, Pokemon Horizons will have to rely much more heavily on the strength of its storytelling and its brand new characters. The basic premise of Horizons is that Liko, a girl from Paldea, enrolls at the Indigo Academy in Kanto to broaden her horizons, only for her life at the academy to be cut short when a villainous group known as the Explorers come looking for a mysterious pendant given to Liko by her grandmother. Liko is then rescued by a group of airborne adventurers known as the Rising Bolt Tacklers, and decides to join their ranks to travel the skies and discover the truth about the pendant. And much like Ash in Pokemon Journeys, she is joined by a co-protagonist. His name is Roy, and he dreams of becoming an adventurer like those of the olden days, who will challenge legendary Pokemon, explore the world, and hunt for Pokemon and treasure in unexplored places. And just like that, with 2 mysteries and 1.5 dreams, the adventure begins. Whereas Pokemon Journeys was basically a fan service festival leaning on 25 years of Ash Ketchum history, Pokemon Horizons is as fresh as hot biscuits and has everything to prove or everything to lose. In order to make an impact, Horizons is, and probably has to be, a much more traditional style of adventure story compared to the flexible pseudo-tournament / catch everything that moves / Project Mew / who even knows what is happening right now premise of Pokemon Journeys. As such, we see a textbook hero's journey start, with Liko forced into action by a menacing threat, and Roy answering his call to adventure by seizing the opportunity and joining Liko's travel party. And the ambitions of these two characters quickly become intertwined in ways that will become clearer and clearer as the series progresses. The premise of Horizons is totally different from the premise of Pokemon Journeys, and based on what we've seen of Horizons so far, the structures supporting these two series are just as different. Since Journeys was set up as a tasting platter of all things Pokemon, it was structured so that we could get a little bit of this and a little bit of that wherever, whenever, without killing time traversing between locations. So thanks to Bottomless Pockets Chad Dad Cerise, the boys could travel to any region lickety-split by land, sea, or air, except apparently the Orange Islands. Rest in peace, Orange Islands. And so one episode could be set in Kanto, the next in Hoenn, the next in Kalos, and so on. The narrative itself was just as flexible since the research fellow work, Ash's World Coronation Vermilion series matches, and Go's Project Mu trial missions were non-linear and could take place anywhere in the world. On one hand, this gave the writers the freedom to try out all kinds of ideas and all kinds of episodes as they pleased. And on the other hand, it resulted in an unfocused narrative with strange pacing and big gaps between events that should have been closely tied together. Meanwhile, Pokemon Horizons unfolds on a much more linear track based on what we've seen so far, with the Rising Volt Tackler's airship serving as a central hub that gradually moves from one location to the next, instead of zipping around by instant transmission. To be honest, the linear sense of progression in Pokemon Horizons is exactly what I wanted from Pokemon Journeys. That is, a round-the-world adventure wherein Ash would travel the regions bit by bit, one by one, in a meaningful way. Instead, we got a smattering of locations and events strung together by the Vermilion City level select screen, and although it was a lot of fun, I think this aspect of the show could have been handled better. Of course, premise and structure aside, it's the characters that make a show tick. So let's discuss the rosters. Regarding the heroes, Pokemon Journeys was centered on dual protagonists Ash and Go, with the sort of sub-hero, Chloe, doing her own thing a few rungs down the ladder. As for Pokemon Horizons, the story is focused on Liko and Roy, with the Rising Volt Tacklers boosting them up from beneath. And these two casts of characters create two very different anime. On the Journeys side of things, Ash Ketchum is Ash Ketchum, and Pokemon Journeys saw Ash at the absolute pinnacle of his career. On one hand, he was really cool, competent, and put together a dream team like no other, but on the other hand, his dominance made him less interesting in terms of character development than he had been in earlier eras of the show. Comparatively, Go had more room to grow, and it was cool to see him develop into a competent trainer and a catch expert, even if his development was a bit rushed. Relative to Ash, Go is more calm and calculating, and he has a sort of whimsical, soft aspect to his character that contrasts nicely with Ash's hard-headed, explosive attitude. And one of the big draws of Journeys was seeing how these contrasting personalities interacted. Then we had Chloe, a girl struggling to find her confidence and her dream, who slowly began to figure things out over the course of the show. We also got some good one-off episodes focused on Chloe, but her story wasn't exactly a showstopper and still hadn't taken off by the end of the series. Honestly, Chloe feels kind of like a rough prototype for Liko, as there are striking similarities in their personalities as well as their breakthrough moments. It's just that Liko is a lot more interesting. Speaking of Liko, Pokemon Horizons has a dual protagonist setup quite similar to Pokemon Journeys. Compared to Ash Ketchum, Liko is much more introspective and reluctant to take action. This gives Pokemon Horizons a very different feel from any anime series before it, as we often hear her inner monologues as she struggles to work out what to do. That said, she can still rise to the task when she needs to, and she is already breaking out of her shell. Then we have Roy, the second coming of the energy that Ash Ketchum brought to the show for so many years. He bolts around like a bouncy banana, leaps into action at a moment's notice, and is dead set on achieving his goal. Even more so than Ash and Go, Liko and Roy are really different from one another, and it's really been a blast seeing them interact. In the supporting role, we have the Rising Volt Tacklers, who present what is probably the biggest twist in character dynamics in the history of the show, as the Pokemon anime has always been about kids setting out alone into the world to make something of themselves, with any competent adults operating at somewhat of a distance. But now we have all these older, mentor-like figures worked directly into the central cast, and I love this setup for a number of reasons. One, because it's conceptually refreshing to have these mature characters on deck. Two, because the Rising Volt Tacklers members themselves are all gems. And three, because it's going to be interesting to see how they influence the younger characters' development over the course of the adventure. In particular, at present we can see Liko really leaning on badass Freed's guidance and protection, but I imagine that as the story progresses, we will see her gradually develop into a confident adventurer herself. Of course, it's the villains who truly make a story, and Pokemon Journeys and Pokemon Horizons take two very different approaches to characterizing the bad guys. As we know, the Team Rocket trio plus Wobbuffet appearances have always been 90% comedic, 10% serious, okay, maybe only 5% serious, and 100% wholesome. The Rocketeers were never a serious threat to Ash and friends in Journeys, or in any series really, but they played their roles as goofy adults screwing everything up to a T to the very end. On the other hand, the explorers in Pokemon Horizons have been characterized as a much more threatening group. In the first couple episodes alone, they invade Liko's campus, attempt to deceive her with a forged letter, pursue her across the rooftops and into the skies, and even succeed at kidnapping Sprigatito. They also have a generally more menacing aura than Team Rocket, particularly Amethyst. That said, episode 3 showed us that they also have a soft side, when we saw Explorers member Kanya going head over heels for their hostage. Kanya reminds me of James in that there is a caring, kind aspect to her character, not to mention that she seems just as ridiculous. It remains to be seen what the Explorers' motivation motivations really are, but so far the serious to comedic ratio of their appearances is exactly the opposite of Team Rocket's, which has injected a greater sense of danger and tension into Pokemon Horizons. As a side note, it almost feels as if the Explorers and the Rising Volt Tacklers are more mature versions of Team Rocket and an Ash Ketchum travel party. Both sides are cunning, competent, and powerful, and it's especially a pleasure to see Ametheo and Freed playing their cards against one another. It's too early to say how Pokemon Horizons will turn out over the long term, but the linear adventure with strong goals set up from the get-go in the first 5 episodes of Horizons are what I'd hoped that Pokemon Journeys would deliver back when it was first announced. Instead, they probably should have called the English dub Pokemon Destinations, because the level select screen didn't result in anything like a journey, and that structure only compounded the show's sense of directionlessness when it came to the characters' goals and story arcs on an episode-to-episode basis. Basically, the show flitted between self-contained episodes tied to Ash and Go's loosey-goosey goal setups, and fun but disjointed adventure episodes, with no sensible bridges in between. And the disconnected locations made this scenario feel even more aimless. At times, it was really jarring. Don't get me wrong, Pokemon Journeys was fun, and when it hit hard, it hit hard. But I still found myself wanting to see Ash and Go more focused on concrete goals, particularly given that this was Ash's final series. By comparison, Pokemon Horizons has only just begun, but it set a clear course with goals to be expanded upon right off the bat. Liko aims to uncover the mystery of her pendant. Roy aims to be an adventurer and unlock the secrets of his ancient ball. And the Rising Volt Tacklers are supporting these goals as they move towards their own. All the heroes' goals are aligned, and they are clearly tracking towards achieving them. In terms of direction, it feels a lot more like the original Pokemon series than Pokemon Journeys, and that makes sense because, of course, it is a beginning, not an end. The original series was the beginning of Ash's adventure and the beginning of the anime itself, so it absolutely needed to establish what exactly the show was about from the start line. So episode 1 immediately established Ash's goal, and by episode 5, Ash had won Pikachu's loyalty, confronted the recurring villains, caught his first Pokemon, had his first battle, and defeated his first gym leader. Likewise, Misty and Brock's goals were set, and the story was progressing with intention and direction. By comparison, Journeys era Ash started the series without a goal and didn't establish one until he saw Lance and Leon battle in episode 12. As for Go, aside from the practically meaningless mission to catch every Pokemon he meets on the road to Mew, Go doesn't establish a clear goal until he decides to join Project Mew in episode 68, halfway through the series. And Chloe, well, her goal was basically just to discover her goal, but by the end of the series, she doesn't really achieve much aside from falling into a research fellow position. That was the story of Pokemon Journeys, a somewhat disjointed and directionless set of episodes that had to remind us of Ash's and Go's goals at the beginning of every episode, since otherwise we would probably forget what they were even doing. And it certainly wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but it still had its merits as a relaxed, enjoyable series of detours that explored various sides of the world of Pokemon in a way that no series before had done. That said, Pokemon Horizons is the first time since April 1st, 1997 that we've seen a truly new beginning for the anime, and we will have to wait and see how it develops over time, but the fresh characters, interesting goals, and adventurous spirit showcased in the first 5 episodes are good indicators of what's to come. Journeys and Horizons are two very different shows. Each has unique strengths, and each was born out of a very different context. But based on the first stretch of Liko and Roy's adventure, how do you think the two series will stack up?